Good afternoon, everyone. I know I'm late. I had a good reason for being late. So, what I need everyone to do is just share out the broadcast amongst your business network because we're not going to focus solely on the State of the Union address. However, we're going to focus on elements from the address and how businesses should be um, moving and shaking, to use a light term, in this in 2026. As we know, the president spoke a lot about a lot of things. One thing he didn't speak on, but he acted on the next day. I'm gonna bring that into the conversation. So, pull out your contractor's notebook, grab a pen, share it amongst your network, because we have some things to talk about. For those of you catching the stream on replay, I thank you. And if anything here touches you, inspires you, share it amongst your network. And you can also schedule a strategic briefing with the LT&A Associates. So let's get started. Now, the State of the Union, as we know, is just where the president gets up and says the country's fine, if it is fine, even when it's not fine. That's what he does. He also sets some of the intentions or for no, the wrong notebook, for the country. And one thing I found very interesting, or I'm gonna throw out there, and I've talked to it about it to several business owners, to people who are connected to business owners. It's just something I've talked about ad nauseum, and that is his intent to go after fraud, as we call it, fraud, waste, and abuse in the government. And he's actually put the vice president in charge of that. And there was a news briefing this morning concerning that. I don't want to get into the news brief because I haven't had the time to deconstruct it and break it down, but I do want to mention that. And it goes back to something I've always said. You have to maintain your business operations in a way you can pass an audit. I don't care if it's the IRS, the Department of Labor, some of these off-brand audits that the government at various levels tend to want to institute. You have to make sure you're audit ready. You have policies in place. And I'm even go one step further. You know how to conduct and respond to an audit. Because just because an auditor asks for it, if it's outside the scope of that audit, you can push back and say, no, the scope says this. How is it connected? Now, I'm going to be honest with you, it may trigger another audit or to cover that scope. But you don't want to get into a habit of just because someone asks you for something, you just throw it out there. You have to be strategic. You have to be 10 steps ahead of what's going on and where you believe the auditor is going. And I'll even dare say this. If it's your first audit or your 100th audit, you should not go through the audit process without an experienced person that you can talk to, you can turn to, that you can say, look, they're asking for this. I pulled it. I don't know. How can I craft it? How can I word it? Or if I'm just stuck and need to start implementing a correction plan before they ask for it. We are in a political climate, in a political time where the buzzword is fraud. And I'm not talking about it lightly because I am a compliance officer. And I understand the need for businesses to operate in accordance with the law and the rules and regulations of their industry. That's the definition of compliance. Are you following the rules and regulations of your industry, of the government, of your contract? I know that's not the technical definition, but we're boiling it down today. So in light of it being talked about during the State of the Union address, and the IRS has been saying that they're up, the uptick in audits. I think every business needs to, if you have an audit plan or audit process, need to go back and review it. If you don't have one in place, you need to create one, and then you need to test it. I know somebody is saying, well, I have an audit process and it's fine, but have you tested it? Do the stakeholders that you have identified know that they are part of the audit process? Because one of the things that used to be aggravating, we're just going to call it aggravating, at my time as a compliance officer in corporate, were people that I were contacting for information for the audit, and they were like, that's not my job. Well, you're the person listed. So it's more than just writing out a policy. It's more than writing out a procedure. It's ensuring all of the stakeholders understand their roles. I did a live, I think about four, no, it was before my stroke. So it was about 6 years ago. It's understanding your role. And it's understanding your role and everybody else understanding their role. And for those small businesses who say, I don't need policies and procedures, none of this stuff affects me, it does. When you hung up your shingle and said, I'm in business, all of these rules apply to you. And whether they come knock on your door today or 10 years from today, most successful businesses that end up closing their door, it is related to an audit of some sort, usually the IRS, but it's related to an audit of some sort. So I'm just throwing out there, in light of the fact it was brought up, in light of the fact we understand that the IRS is requesting more money to bring on additional agents, audit upticks is there. And don't forget the fact that everybody had to register. Oh, I forget what they called it. I did the registration where you showed that you own the business and where it operated. And that's a whole database for them to just cherry pick people. And for those of you in government contracting, if you're trying to bid large, you need this stuff in place. You need to have it documented when you created it, when you updated it. All of that stuff is subject to audit. Because guess what? The government wants to ensure you're running your business the way you said you run it, and it can be proven. And the fact that you created something in 2014 and never touched it again doesn't make your company look good. You have to pass desk audit. So be sure your company is audit ready in this day and time, because you don't want to miss out on any opportunities that are coming, and you don't want to put your company at risk due to oversight, neglect, or the erroneous thought process of it doesn't apply to me. For all of you coming into the room, say hello in the chat. And we're going to keep going. Another thing, he highlighted some of the achievements or transformations in the country. The secure border, the inflation going down, income going up, military is strong, etc., etc. Now, I really wish, and I know I'm living in la la land, but I really wish he had have just identified one or two factors that he can stand and say this with strength. Um, However, in anything that is secure needs to stay secure. So we have to look at that. I want to talk about something he said in regards to the tariffs, because I thought this was very interesting, and I think people may have missed it because they were so busy looking at the political spectrum. Nobody thought about the strategic business implementation of it. He made the statement that the Supreme Court, now he disagrees with the ruling, that's cool, overturned his tariffs, his rules on tariffs. But he said they were still in place because he did something most leaders don't think to do. He went back and grabbed something old that could be adapted to do what he's doing now. We're in an age of everybody's adapting. They embracing all this new technology, all this new skills, and I'm not telling you not to. But there are times when all you have to do is reach back and grab something that's already there, tried and true. You know it works. Pull it out, dust it off, and you may have to make one or two tweaks for it to work in 2026 versus 2000. But new isn't always the strategy. Sometimes the strategy is to look back at what you've done, pick up that old thing and make a twist to it, adjust it so that it fits your current strategy, or create a hybrid between the old and the new so that it fits your current strategy. And I thought that from a business perspective, that was smart. He didn't try to fight over something new. He just went back and said, okay, this failed. Let's see what's in my toolkit that I can pull out and adapt for what I'm trying to do today. And how many of us are sitting in our businesses trying to adapt every new shiny object when there are times when you just need to reach back in your toolkit, dust it off, and adjust and move forward? Keep in mind, when I'm talking about the State of the Union address, I'm not making political statements. I'm taking it and saying, how is it going to affect the business economy? And we have enough political pundits, professional and amateur. I'm talking about, how does it affect the economy? How does it affect your business? How does it shape your strategy? How does it affect the way you intend to scale? Do you need to go back and readjust it? Or can you just go forward and create a side contingency in the event of? And I want to bring something up that wasn't talked about at the State of the Union. However, it is critical for business functions. Now, as we know, there are there's multiple things going on, but I'm going to cover two. One is the situation in Mexico. Now, I need to go back, not dig through my notes, and look through all the information I've collected over the last few days and analyze it a little more. However, we do have Americans hunkering in place in Mexico. The last time I checked. If I'm incorrect, somebody can let me know. However, with them hunkering in place, that brings up, if you do any kind of social work, if you do any type of mental health or awareness, those individuals who went through that process, those individuals who are going through that process, those individuals who are trying to get home because of the process, that is a key marker for you to come in with your services, come in alongside the government with whatever they're doing to address that situation. And if it's addressed, help those who went through it, whether civilian or military, get to the next area with your expertise and with your help. If you package it right, you'll gain access to those individuals who will be in need of that mental health service. I'm gonna tell you, if it was me, I would be distraught a little bit because I have children. And those people who are traveling solo, they need help. Those people who are traveling with their families, they need help. And if you provide any of those services, this is an opportune time to reach out and make your company and your services known. And then I want to talk about, and there's something I wish he had have addressed in the State of the Union address, that whole situation over in Iran and over with Israel. I don't know why anybody would be surprised. That area has been that area for decades. However, what I see, because if you look at history and then you pair for today, if you are a government contractor, the Department of War is going to do a little upticking on their contracts, or they're going to be adding on services to contracts they can tag those services onto. And why I'm saying that is because they're always looking for leadership trainers. They're always looking for companies that can come in and do the financial service type services. Because when there's a hotbed or multiple hotbeds, they always want to move their troops around, which leaves pockets and holes that you as a contractor can fill. Now, I'm not going to focus just on government contractors, but I had to throw that out there. And not only the Department of War, we have right now I have a headache. So the name is dropping out of my head. The Department of Homeland Security may not be totally funded, but there are operations that are being done in tandem with other agencies that is an opportunity for you to sit and look and view what's coming down the pike. Everybody is spending priorities or getting ready to shift in the next 60 days. Because as we know, in June, we go into low hanging fruit season, and you want to prepare for that now, not in June. But before low hanging fruit season, and low hanging fruit season is basically when they're trying to spend their government budgets. So they're awarding more service contracts and et cetera, et cetera. But one thing I want to look at within, I would say, the next 60 days, the spending plan for most agencies is going to start to shift. Keep an eye out for all new. Every agency puts out their priority or their target spending. I would keep an eye out for new priorities and new targets. They've already started hitting the streets. It's just people aren't connecting the dots, and not necessarily connected to the military action. However, because the government's focus is shifting some, the spending is going to shift. And the way it trickles down from the federal to the state will not shift, but understanding the rules around that money being allocated to the state is very important, which goes back to my first point. Even though it's a state contract, if it's using federal dollars, there are certain things you have to adhere to. There are certain things you have to understand. There are certain things that you must, it's not a suggestion, you must do. And understanding these rules and understanding how these things shift and ebb and flow will assist you in bidding as a prime or a sub, forming joint ventures. And that is forming a joint venture. If somebody's trying to do one with you and they're not, oh, we don't need an attorney, you don't need to do business with them. Joint ventures is a little more convoluted than a straight partnership, but that's another lie for another day. If anybody have any questions, you can drop them in the chat. I don't know if I'm live on TikTok as well. I don't know if it will appear on this screen or not. And quite frankly, I don't have my TikTok open. So if you have questions, send me a direct DM, and because I have a list of lives, I will merge it into my list of lives. Now, he did say the inflation rate is 1.7%, which I think is great. One thing now, gas is below, I think he said $2.30 in most states. And the mortgage rate is on the decline, which I knew about the mortgage rate being on a decline. However, with everything going on geopolitically, and I understand he's issued the order that gas prices cannot be increased. You can't use this situation to price gouge. I still want businesses to look at energy as a whole, electric, all of that. With these new data centers coming in, and most of the costs for those data centers are being pushed out. Excuse me, being pushed out. That is a cost you need to ensure that you are calculating from your end and from your customer's end. How are you intending to handle any potential shifts in energy? Because the president can issue that order, but then something happens tomorrow and boom, you got to start all over again. So, how are you positioned to shift that energy? I'm actually working on a guide for businesses to develop a emergency plan, a strategy plan, because there's just been a lot of things, and no, and I'm not. There have been a lot of things going on, and businesses as a whole need to understand what can happen and how to shift through them. And so I know somebody's asking, well, what does that have to do with energy? Simple. Not too long ago, I believe it was either Texas or Florida, I can't remember which place, they had a blackout because the grid was overloaded. How is your business going to handle that? How will your business handle that and continue to serve its clients? If you don't have a plan, then everybody is guessing at the time of the emergency. How will your employees know that they're supposed to log in and work anyway? Because a lot of employees would say, well, the power is out, I don't have to go to work. Will they get paid anyway? And are you required to pay them during that time? If you don't have that emergency plan in place and it's not communicated very well, you could be sitting there and the lights go off. I saw a car hit a transformer, and guess what? A whole area was out of power for 3 days. These are the mundane, everyday um, occurrences that affect business. And because you don't have a plan, or you don't have a backup plan or a contingency or whatever, you can be adversely affected to the point of near devastation. And nothing's worse than having a workforce that's confused around what's going on. So when he brought this up, and in light of the strikes in Iran, and I know they're saying Venezuela is stabilized, but who knows? We need to come have a community where you're focused on that, not to the point of obsession, but it's a box that needs to be checked. How does my company continue in the event of the winter snowstorms that just went through? Some people were stuck for days. I was staying at a hotel during part of that time, and the manager and somebody else was stuck at the hotel working every shift for 3 days because people were literally snowed in their apartment communities. Streets weren't plowed yet because two storms came back to back. And one of those storms, in the middle of it, rain fell, so that rain turned into hard ice, and then snow fell on top of that. What is your plan as a company to address that? When you have days where your company cannot open it, or you have a situation where you have certain employees that are burden holding the load for 3 days because nobody can get in, and they just so happen to be the ones to get stuck or was live nearby or whatever. How are you planning for that? What is your emergency plan for that? Think about that. I think there's a lot of things that as business owners we do not think about. Now they're saying private sector growth is there, but we also know that with the introduction of AI, lower positions are disappearing. How are you adjusting? How has AI, have you taken time to analyze the impact of the adoption of AI in your business. I know everybody is singing its praise, but where there's an up, there's a down. So have you performed that analysis on your business and then taken that analysis and looked at your strategic plan and said, we need to make some adjustments. We need to train up our current workforce. We may need to restructure or rearrange where our people are working so that when AI is brought in, there's no impact to the way the organization runs and there's no impact to the workforce, because we know a scared workforce tends to abandon ship when they think that things aren't clear, which destabilizes the organization, destabilizes revenue. I may need to rename this live, but all of this, we're talking about the golden age of America, is what the president called it. But once again, when the gold comes in, how is it being distributed? And are you in position to take advantage? You can be a $10 billion company and not keep an eye on your strategy and become a $10 company tomorrow. So keep that in mind. And now there were some things he introduced I had some questions about. The auto loan being a tax deduction. Now there are companies who own fleets of cars. How will that affect your tax structure? If you haven't talked to a tax professional, and I'm no dig against H&R Block, but I'm not talking about H&R Block. I'm talking about a tax professional who does tax strategy planning. If you own any vehicles, have they looked at this and communicated how it could potentially affect you? If you're still in the growth phase and you're still using the tax preparer you used when you graduated college, you may need to reassess the brain trust or your strategic advisors. I had a live 3 years ago when I talked about when you hit certain thresholds, your strategic advisor may need to change. Your tax advisor may need to change if they're not communicating to you this is the potential effect. Because we've had examples going around, and I'm going to use this example. I pray I don't offend him by using it. But for those in the faith community, we understand that there's somebody who is facing a little bit of trouble because of taxes. Now, when I heard what happened, I knew exactly what happened. One year, he had to pay back $1 million in taxes. The next year, those taxes were readjusted to drop his tax liability. Totally legal if it's done correctly, if everything is mapped out. Excuse me. Everything is mapped out. Everything has to withstand the IRS audit. And a lot of people think audits are audits are audits is audits. No, IRS has a different standard. Matter of fact, they define certain things differently. And their statute of limitation is when you go to meet the Lord. So they can come after you at any time. But what was done technically was legal. The way it was done is what got him in trouble. So do you have strategic advisors who are just saying, let's just move some things around and keep going, and we're praying and we're holding our fingers and twisting our toes praying that it's right? Or do we have a strategic advisory team that says, okay, this is what we're trying to do, this is the way we can do it, this is the way it needs to be structured so that we remain compliant all the way through? All of those things is very important. So you have whether you own one vehicle through your company or you own 10 or 100, that tax deduction can make a difference, and a significant difference in the bottom line of your organization. Then we also want to keep in mind that he's doing this healthcare. He's focused on healthcare costs, but he also introduced two things that I thought was interesting. TrumpRx.gov, how does that affect businesses? Now, some of us are solopreneurs. You're still a business, but you're a solopreneur. How does the healthcare costs that he's implementing or attempting to implement, how does that affect you? How does that affect your business, your ability to hire people? How does that affect your taxes? There are a lot of questions that you should be sitting with your strategic team and getting the answers to. Once again, if you don't have a tax professional, if you don't have a mentor, a coach, whatever you want to call them, that you can call up and hold these conversations with, I understand. I actually had my coach was hosting a masterclass, and she was saying retainers. A lot of companies hate retainers because they see it as money going out they don't receive any benefit from. But the benefit should come from the fact that professional is doing research you don't have to do. That they're then preemptively informing you about so that you can make the correct steps to avoid a pitfall. And oftentimes we're so one dimensional with looking at money that we don't understand the benefits we should be receiving. Like those who are on, I'm those who engage me under retainer, I do the research so you don't have to. Now, I'm not saying you shouldn't be informed. That's not what I'm saying. But what I am saying is, as a part of my retainer service, I did the research. You don't have to. I send out I send out a newsletter and different updates so that you know what's going on and how it can affect you. If you want to book a time so we can do a one-on-one to say for your business specifically, that's what the retainer is for. It should be viewed. Now I know some people who don't like insurance because they've paid into it for years and didn't use it. But then that one time you need it, you're glad to have it. That's what a retainer is like. It's like insurance. And whoever you have on retainer or on call or have the ability to touch to get the answers to, one of the answers questions you should be asking is about, I own vehicles. How does that hurt or help me in terms of taxes? I also found interesting the what is it called? There was this other thing he was doing as far as matching people who didn't get a match from their company. And he was saying that the government is going to match up to $1,000. Now, I don't know if people remember this or not. Back when they first started talking about the insolvency of Social Security, and they were talking about privatizing it, one of the ideas thrown out was individuals would open up their retirement accounts and the government would put $1,000 a year, up to $1,000 a year into that retirement account. That's why when I heard this, I was like, that's a plan that's been floated around for at least 20 years that I know of. So I'm like, is this something a business could possibly offer to their workforce? Or if it has to be individuals, will businesses start saying, well, if you open your own account, then we'll add X amount of money to your account and keep going. There are just some things that I feel is kind of interesting with that proposal. And the first thing that came to my mind is this a precursor to the phasing out of Social Security? where in another 10, 15 years, everybody's going to have something like this or a vehicle like this. Because even with the government putting in $1,000, it's cheaper than Social Security with the way it's being run now. So I just found certain things in his address very interesting. Now, there are a few key factors that I haven't fully threshed out yet. So I will return to like thresh that out and look at it from a business perspective to say, hey, it looks like if you do this, it's going to go this way. And I'm also keeping an eye on updates to certain regulations because there have been a lot of regulatory updates rolling out behind the scenes in government contracting and in business in general that everybody should be aware of. I don't care where you sit. I don't care if you're a middle manager or if you sit in the seat of the CEO. There are things that are going on that you need to be aware of and then bump that or compare it to or look at it in view of your strategy, your corporate strategy for the next 3, 5 years, however you plan out your strategy. And how does it affect it? Do you need to make changes? And I'm even go here. If you have to make one contingency plan that's like a one pager, you're sitting pretty. But if your contingency plan is as long as your strategic plan, then you need to just merge the two and create a whole new strategy for your company. With that said, and I don't see any questions in the chat, but as I said, some comments don't come through to my streaming system. So just direct message me on whatever platform, LinkedIn, YouTube, TikTok, if you have questions or if you just want to schedule a time for us to talk to see how your company stands in this environment. I will be going live more frequently, utilizing different things, different tools. And I'm also starting a series called Rise of the CEO. Now, somebody's going to say, well, that only applies to new businesses. No, that applies to everybody because we're going to talk about handling grief. We're going to talk about recovering from medical catastrophe as a business owner. I will share my personal story of recovering from a stroke and trying to rebuild my business. And it can be done. We're talking about that shift in mentality that you have to make when you jump to the next level, whatever that level is for you. I saw a post on Facebook and it made me chuckle because the person said you don't have to worry about scaling until you hit $10 million. And I'm like, ma'am, to scale is to rise. So you're going to be rising at each level. And what it took for you to make 50,000, the mindset, the strategies, the all in, the staffing is different to hit a million, 2 million. So I just felt that statement was a little interesting, say the least. But with that said, I'm going to end this with I will see you either later this week or beginning next week will be the regular broadcast. So keep an eye on, if you're on YouTube, subscribe. If you're on LinkedIn, you'll see later on where I'm going to post something where you can join my mailing list on any of the platforms. So you can stay informed, stay aware, and that's what I have for you today. For those of you who wants to know what's going on, what is the president doing, but you don't want the political talking points, you want the business talking points so that you can prepare your business. I'm your person, and I'm the person that's always going to bring you that business environment impact statement on anything that's going on. With that said, remember, a stressed mind can't create. So when you're hitting frustration or you're hitting that wall in your business, just get up, walk away, go sit outside, Soak in the sun that's coming out more, because the answer is in the quiet, it's in the peaceful moments. And with that, have an amazing day.